Welcome everybody to our Driftless Dialogue. Thanks again for coming. Our Driftless Dialogue lecture series is hosted by Kickapoo Valley Reserve in partnership with the Friends of Kickapoo Valley Reserve. I'm Amber Birch, the education coordinator here. Before we get started, the Kickapoo Reserve Management Board would like to acknowledge that the state and federal lands that comprise the reserve fall within the ancestral homelands of First Nations people, including the Ho-Chunk Nation. We recognize the sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk and other First Nations and will work towards a shared future by continuing to create collaborative opportunities to protect and preserve these lands. Speaking of those who came before us, tonight we'll be diving back into memories of what life was like around these parts in years gone by. Though he's likely well known by many of you, I'm going to briefly introduce our speaker tonight. So Brad Steinmetz is a local historian who has spent decades learning and preserving the stories of this area from 20 years ago to 200 years. Brad has authored such books as That Dam History, the story of the Lafarge Dam Project, and Lafarge, the story of a Kickapoo River town, volumes 1 and 2. He's also written forewords for many more. You can find these and other pearls in the Friends gift shop. So please join me in welcoming Brad Steinmetz.
Thanks, everybody. Welcome to some more sharing of Driftless memories, and I think to start with, we should go around and everybody just tell everybody else who you are, because some people might not know.
Dave Sarnowski, retired teacher from Lafarge Public.
Oh, be careful. Yes, Brad. I'm Gwen Hatfield. Anyway, I've been living here now for 25 years.
Okay.
Carolyn Steinmetz.
Oh.
That's a familiar name.
Luann Hoffer.
Joan Peterson.
Chuck Hadfield.
Barb Sarnowski.
Lonnie Weber.
Richard Weber.
Liz Staines.
Sharon Meisner.
And I'm Brad Steinmetz again. I think one of the things that I would like to start with, we have a beautiful evening, and again, where we go with this or how we do it depends on what you want to talk about. And it was really interesting last time when we met on the 4th of July, if you remember that evening. And it went a lot of different directions, and I had a whole list of things that I had planned maybe to talk about that we never got to. So one of the things I thought we could do is start out by going outside and taking a look at those names on the front wall. So follow me. Barb has staked out a few names here, and I'll have her talk about it. Go.
Okay. Well, Dempsey, the homestead for Andrew Dempsey was up Jug Creek, the South Jug Creek. The old house still stands, but barely anymore. My father grew up there. He married a young lady from up Bear Creek. So I have relatives in both Jug and Bear. And of course, my dad had part of the farm. My aunt and uncle, Leo, Lillian, and Joey Dempsey had the other part. It was pretty much just a regular old type farm. My grandfather was so proud that he had the horses. Blackjack was his favorite one, and he talked about how that's the way they worked the fields. And of course, when you lived up the creek, you had the little one-room schoolhouse. You knew everybody. That was your social connection with people. And so, these hills over here, I very much tramped around a lot in my younger years. So that's the Dempsey part.
Does anybody else have relatives up here? And remember, we've got almost 150 different names, families, individuals who lived on this land when it was bought up by the federal government back in the late 60s, early 70s. And so it's interesting that the variety of people that were here and where they were lived and all that kind of thing. But I'm gonna pick out two that I want you to think about And I want to have you think about, why have I got these two couples, and why did I pick these two? So go right up here at the top, and this is a little hard to see because it's kind of wearing out here. Emmerdell and Henry Trapp. And then if you come around this way, we have Howard Enrico Anderson. So why have I chosen those two out of all of these names all over the wall, almost 150 different names, families, and all of that kind of thing? Why did I choose those two? Any ideas?
I think the traps are this farm right here, where we're standing.
All right. The traps are almost on this farm right here. Almost. Because the traps are on the other side of your, if you look at that tree right there in the middle of the lawn, their line fence started right there. And their farm was down in that valley and up north and basically in that valley there. Guess who owned this property right here? Oh, do you think it could be? You think it could be Howard and Rico? Huh? Yes, it is. And they lived over where the dam was built. They lived on the hill across the river. As a matter of fact, that campground, what is that campground? Huh? Double A campground, right when when you drive up on top of the dam, and that first one where a lot of the horse people always can't get that campground and everything. That was a Howard Anderson farm. So they were neighbors, and the eastern 40 of that farm crossed the river and came right up here. And the border, the northern border of that 40 was right where that tree was. As a matter of fact, that tree, which is regrown, it was there a while, and then you can see it's kind of died off, and it's regrown. That was always the marking spot for the two properties. And Anderson didn't like to farm over here because you had to take the cows on the road or, haul them over here, and he didn't like it and all of that kind of stuff. So basically it was always rented to the Trapps, and they used it for pasture. This was all a pasture up here. And they had a dairy operation, and their barn and everything was down in that valley. And so they worked that out. And so if you'd come up here back in the 60s, Trapps would have been using this as a pasture up here where the building is and all that kind of thing. But there's another reason why I chose these two couples. Any idea as to why else?
Last holdouts?
Huh?
Last holdouts?
No. Matter of fact, what's interesting about this is when the government started to buy the properties, they started at the dam site. So Trapps and Andersons were virtually one of the first ones to sell out. And there was a little problem with that because the previous year the Corps of Engineers had called all these landowners, all these people, down to meetings at the gym in Lafarge at the school, and they told them, now we're going to start buying your property. And they told them, we will start buying the property at the dam site and then move our way north as the project progresses. Now, whatever you do, don't try to improve your property in any way, because we are assessing it right now, and we're not going to pay for anything you do to try to improve it. Okay, well, everybody kind of got that, except that fall, Howard had all of his outbuildings whitewashed. And they really looked nice the next spring when the assessors came. So the barn and the tobacco shed and all those looked a little bit better. And everybody going, he wasn't supposed to do that. But he did. And he probably got a little better price. But that's all going to be worked out later as more people further north do more negotiating. But these people down here, there wasn't much negotiating to do. They didn't know what to do. So a price came in. They said it was a fair market value. And they basically took it. So they're neighbors, but we still haven't got, how about the name? How about that name, Rico? And do any of you know anything about Emmerdale? No? You do. Yeah. These are both mixed race couples, which is very rare here in the Kickapoo Valley at that time. Now, Henry Trapp, as a young man, went over to a dance in Valley. Valley dances were notorious, and they were fun. And there, he started dancing, and he started drinking, and he really got enamored with a young lady who was also dancing there by the name of Emmerdale Roberts. And she was a member of the, you know, don't you? No? Cheyenne, yep. She was a member of the Cheyenne Valley community, which was the largest African-American rural population in the state of Wisconsin. And he fell in love with her. So after a few more dates, they decided they were going to get married, and he brought Emmerdale to meet his mother. His father was gone by that time, but he brought her home to meet her mother and said, Emmerdale and I want to get married. And his mother said, no, you can't, because you're white and she's black. Oh, all right. And his mother owned the farm here, and he ran it. Henry ran it. And so she said, no, you can't live here. You guys can't get married. You two can't live here. And so they went up over the hill here, and they rented a place to start with and lived up there. Never did get married. Had 3 boys. The first 2 boys were Roberts, went by the name of Roberts. And then when Henry's mom finally passed away, they went out to Viroqua, got a marriage license, got married, and the last son was Vic Trapp, and he always went by the name of Trapp, but the older boys always went by the name of Roberts. And so the second part of this, I mean, that's an interesting story. And in the book, The People Remember, I did an interview with Henry. And it was at the end of his life. He was in a senior center down in Viola. And I went in, and Emmerdale they were living there together. And he sat down, and he'd heard about this project where they were interviewing the people that used to live up here, and he wanted to be part of it. And so I said, Emmerdale, would you like to come sit in the front? No, I don't. So she sat kind of in the back of the room, and so I started interviewing Henry. And advanced in age, he would occasionally become a little confused, couldn't think of a name, whatever. And she would quietly say the name and straighten him out and all of that kind of stuff. So at the end, by the end, I was kind of interviewing them both. But she was very adamant that he step forward and do it, and she'd help him out, that kind of thing, So very, very, very interesting couple. As a matter of fact, Henry passed away just a few months after we were able to do that conversation. And that is in the book, The People Remember. It's very, very interesting talk. Now let's go to Rico. Howard Anderson, when he graduated high school, he went in the service. This is the early 1950s, and he was assigned to serve in Japan. This is when we had an occupation force in Japan after World War II, and then in the Korean War, they stayed there, you know, all of that. So while he was there, he fell in love with a local lass, and they got married over there. It was kind of controversial. I can remember hearing from one of his sons about it. And I mean, they told it, you know, a little hard. I mean, they were going, are you sure? You know, the service kept saying, are you sure you want to do this and all that kind of stuff? And yes. Okay. So they were married, and then they came back here, and they ran a dairy operation. They also had some mink, which at that time, almost everybody did around here. But they also had some mink up on that farm. And so when the Corps came out and said, we're going to buy your land up, Howard still wanted to farm. And so he, when he was bought out, then they moved up between Norwalk and Sparta, bought a farm up there, and he continued to farm up there until he retired. And then one of the boys took over that farm. And one of his grandsons was at a talk that I gave here a couple years ago. And he brought a lot of information with him on that family. And so it was really interesting type of thing. But and Rico was very much and they had 3 boys. Kind of interesting, because Traps had 3 boys, Andersons had 3 boys. And she was very much interested and liked the school down here, and they were going to the school, and of course everything had to move. The Traps, after they sold out, they eventually bought a place up toward West Lima. Henry was basically at retirement age, kind of wanted to farm a little bit, but was pretty much out of it by the time he did move. But he wanted to be on a farm because he'd been on a farm his entire life. So here you have these 2 people who were neighbors and were also mixed marriage couples here in the Kickapoo Valley, which very, very rare, but yet neighbors of all kinds here. So for years I have taught history here at the reserve, and I used to speak with school groups all the time. And I'd always ask him, do you have anybody on this list that you know or have any, or relative or anything like that kind of stuff, you know? And it was always amazing. Didn't matter where these groups were from, there was always somebody they were connected. And I can just go around and point out cousin after cousin that I have on this, on both my father's and mother's side of the family. You know, all kinds of them from, you know, I mean, here's Don and Merle Steinmetz here, you know, but then you just slide over a little bit and I can pick up with somebody else, and there's a Millie Lawrence up there is a cousin, and it's just one after another. The most astonishing 2 instances I ever had with this was Toma came down. And as a matter of fact, it was the school outside of Toma at that little burg east of Toma. Used to have a grade school there. Huh? Oakdale. So they all came down. And so, you know, I'm giving this talk out here and everything, and, you know, do you recognize any names and all that kind of stuff? And then all of a sudden the boys come over here and they're starting to look around, and they're looking at this, that, and the next thing. And these 2 boys stopped me and they said, "This is our friend McKinley Buddy." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "That's his name, and he was named after his grandfather, who sold the land, and then they moved up to Oakdale." So he comes, and he's just amazed. He has no idea, you know, what we're talking about here. And so it's just like, boom, all of a sudden, he's interested in working and into it, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. But an exact name on that one. The other one that kind of threw me was a group from Madison came up. There used to be a school that would always come It was the alternate school. What was that called, Barb? Do you remember? I can't remember that group, but they'd always come up for a week. They'd camp out over to Avalanche, and they'd spend a day here, and they'd spend a day here, there, and doing all kinds of different stuff. So, they're all from Madison. And so I'm going, does anybody recognize any names up on the wall? Because they're not going to. All of a sudden, this young lady puts her hand up and she says, yeah, Dorian Barkley. Whitey Barkley. Some of you might remember Whitey. And she goes, yeah, Whitey Barkley. I said, how do you know Dorian Barkley? And she said specific to me, is that Whitey Barkley? I said, yes, that's Dorian Whitey Barkley. How do you know him? My mom used to work for him when they were pelting mink. I said, who is your mom? And then she got to talking about her mom originally kind of grew up in the area. And of course, those mink pelting jobs were a big deal, and everybody, needed work back then and all that kind of stuff. She said, yeah, she used to work for him. I went, okay, that's it. It's just off the blank here. So it's important that we remember these people that used to live here. And to stress that importance, let's look what Bernice Schroeder said about this. I was hoping Kathy, her daughter, could be with us tonight. She was here last time. But, by the way, make a note. This sign needs to be fixed up. I guess everybody notified. But Bernice, in 2002, when they flipped these grounds over and, this became the reserve, she said, dedicated to the history of the land, this wall lists the families whose land was sold or condemned for the Lafarge Lake and Dam project that never came to be. We honor them and all previous stewards of the land by deserving and protecting the reserve for future generations. And Bernice adds, our homes are gone, but the memories live on forever. And that's a key aspect of that. So another thing that Bernice did was right over here. Let's turn around and walk over to this beautiful garden. Oh, those are cool, aren't they? What are those? What are those? What are these? Anybody know what these are? Gardeners, what are these? Those are cool. Anybody know? Wow, that's neat. Come on up. How many of you have worked on this garden? I mean, not right now, but sometime. How many of you have worked on this garden? All right, we got quite a few hands up. This garden is important because as we remember those names over there, this garden helps us do that. Because many of the plants that we have in this garden were taken off where people used to live. And very early on, that was a plan in this turnaround. Let's make a garden here. And so when you see, for instance, this peony bush over here, doesn't have any flowers right now, but it has gorgeous ones in the spring. You can say that's from the Lawrence farm. That was up on Millie Lawrence's farm. And there are many other plants in here that were taken off where people used to live and then replanted here so those places could be remembered. And look at this beautiful, what is this, hydrangea? And I'm not sure where that's from or whatever. Yeah, that's probably replanted or something. But anyway, the whole idea here is to remember those families again, to try and come up with those. And so again, Bernice Schroeder was very instrumental in making this all happen. And she was with the crews that went out on the land and dug up the plants. And somewhere in the reserve, there is a map of this garden that shows and names which plants were taken and all of that kind of thing.
Bernice had a Lexus, very snazzy Lexus car.
Here.
Bernice Schroeder had a Lexus car, and it was fancy, expensive, leather interior and whatever. And she and Brian Turner then went on a mission, driving onto KVR land, even knowing that they were violating whatever rules. They didn't care. They were going to rescue these plants that were left behind. And so they told it almost as a story about like you left your children behind. You moved away and you left your kids here, you know. And so that's what they did. They were on a rescue mission. So she would take a shovel and they would dig them up, and they'd set them in the back of pile them in the back of her car, and then they brought them in here and painted and planted them. So she was a very, very determined lady, and had so much interest in what went on here and the stories that we were going to tell. Her statement was what we just read down there.
Yeah. And you know that it's interesting if you walk the paths here on the reserve in the spring, you just come along and here's an iris, or here's a lily, or whatever, you know, or here's a peony. And you know instantly people used to live here, you know, because these aren't wild plants. They've been planted and they're still coming back. And that gives you an idea. And many of those that are here are, you know, doing the same thing, reminding people that many of these plants used to be out on property where people lived.
Even these trees were transplanted off of the reserve.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and
Big clamshell thing that they pulled them up by the roots and set
Yep.
them in, and they've grown really well.
yes, very well. And up by this, what's this, a birch? Up by this birch, there's a plaque that commemorates Bernice's part in doing this. So you can see that too. So it's important that people realize what this is and how it worked and all of the work that it takes to make this such a beautiful garden. I mean, the friends are working at this all the time to make this the beautiful garden that it has maintained all these years. So, and with many original plants off the properties out on the reserve. Okay, one other thing I'd like to show while we're out here. So let's go this way. Oh, here it is. I thought that was up there. Here it is. Here's the plaque. I didn't realize it was out here. I thought it was up by the tree there, but here it is on the rock. All right, here we are at the start of Visitor Center Trail. What makes this trail different than the other trails on the reserve? What's that? It is handicapped accessible. Wheelchair accessible. Now, how did that happen? Anybody know? You do. You do. You do. Some of you do. One of the things after the reserve was created was that under the direction of Marcy West, the first director, they made a real effort to reach out to all the families that used to live here. And they invited them back. it gave them lifetime passes to the property. Anytime you want to come back and stay. And so many of those families started coming back and having family reunions here. And one of the families always would go up here to the Willow Camp, just north of us, and they would meet for a weekend, generally around Labor Day. And sometimes it would stretch into a week-long event. And they would walk where they used to live. And they would take the grandkids and the great-grandkids and tell them all about it. And this is where your grandfather farmed, and this is what we did here, and the barn was here, and, all of that kind of stuff. Well, one of those families, there was a member who was in a wheelchair. And, of course, he couldn't get out on any of the paths. He couldn't go to those places. And so they came up with an idea, what about if we had a path that was accessible for everybody? This is it. And that family started raising money for this path. And they raised it among themselves, but they reached out to other families, other names on the wall. And they said, wouldn't it be cool if we had a handicap path? And the reserve then started thinking about how could we do this? Where could we do it? And we have a natural loop here. I was taking kids on this loop down to the huge pines at the other end and back up along the river and all of that kind of thing from day one. Never really thinking of it as a handicap accessible kind of a situation, which there was some work that had to be done when they put it in. And you notice there's several picnic tables along the way, handicap accessible. You can pull a wheelchair into the end, and sit there and have your lunch with everybody else. You're not separated. And so you have, again, those names on the wall are back. And they're, they have the garden. They have their names there. They have a path that everybody can follow and everybody can enjoy as they go around. And I'm not sure how much money was raised. It was a lot of money. Thousands and thousands of dollars was raised. And they finally came to the reserve and dumped a whole bunch of cash on the table and said, can you make us a path? And the reserve started looking for grants to match it, and they did, and away they went. So we have this wonderful visitor center trail, which is handicap accessible. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, and probably Amber would know, is there a wheelchair with tracks now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, so there was work that was done to see if we could have a tracked wheelchair right here. There was a group that we were looking into partnering with in the last few years, but it sounds like that group, to have one just live here, it was going to create there was a lot of red tape that everybody would have to go through, including the person who would be borrowing the chair. So we don't have one here, but when we know that there's a need, there's a group, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Toma Squirrels, or NASA is the abbreviation for them. So they're a group that has a few different tracked wheelchairs, and they will let anybody borrow them without any cost. We've used them for schools on field trips and things like that. We're working on possibly doing some other programming where we would be also leaning on that. So people can get access to a tracked wheelchair if they'd like. Those do have limitations, so there's still a lot of trails that you wouldn't be able to just take them on because of the rough terrain. But for this trail, for Harris Trail, it worked quite well. And we, like I said, have used it. Yeah, the stairwell doesn't work very well for the tracked wheelchair. The boy that was using it this spring, he had tried to take it over there's rocks that go just over by the bluff to the picnic table down there, or the bench down there, and he was going to go for it because he was an adventurer and he was in a chair that could get places now, and it didn't quite work so well with the rocks, and we had to work through a situation, but everybody was safe. Everybody everybody was fine. Nothing got broke, including people. But yeah, it does have limitations. Stairs are definitely one of them. Good question.
Who else has got memories about the land here and things?
I have a question, Brad.
Yeah.
I know the 4th of July, the reserve always opens up Old 131 to car traffic. Again, my understanding is so that the families and whatnot could go and visit their old homesteads and whatnot. Are there still a lot of people who are coming back and making that trip every year? Just
They had almost 300 vehicles this 4th of July. And the thing that is amazing, and I was at the main gate a couple of years ago. And whenever, I was kind of guiding the vehicles through and keeping them separated so they wouldn't pile up and on top of each other. And one of the things was that I was a problem in that people knew who I was and wanted to stop and talk about history. And then, hey, you remember my grandma, that one, oh, is that Brad Steinmetz, And then it was amazing how many families come back and take that ride. It's really, really important to them. It's another way of connecting. So, yeah, and I talked to Jackie after it was done, and she said it was virtually packed the entire time. And most of them then come here because the friends set up treats, and there's usually some history that they put out and that kind of thing, and they love that. They come back and look at the old maps and all of those different kinds of things. So, yeah, it's generations. 2-3 generations removed from the people who used to live here, but they want to know and they want to see it. So it's really, really interesting. But now let's hear from the rest of you about other Driftless memories.
I first came to the Kickapoo Valley in July of '75, and I came with a friend to go camping, because I had just returned from a trip to Central America for 6 months and just couldn't handle being in the city. So we came up here and camped at Hanson's old honey farm. And there were still a couple of, like the spring house was still there and a few remnants. Yeah. And then it was just like a weekend of pure bliss, And when we left, we took P to Westby to get back to 14. And I just thought it was the most beautiful place ever. And I grew up in Wisconsin and had no idea that this area existed. And luckily, in January of '76, I came to stay for 3 months house sitting, and I'm still here, so.
Very good. Oh, that's a good story. Thank you very much. And what's your name again?
Sharon Meisner.
Just make sure we get that in there. That's a great story. Who else has got some Driftless memories?
I'm an Ontario girl, so but in 1969, and I was probably about 8 months pregnant. I don't know why we decided to do this, but we took a canoe down and we were camping. I think it's the only time that Chuck ever took me camping, and I think he tipped me over. And I had that baby 2 weeks later. That's what I remember. But we camped what is now the Star Valley. Okay. Yeah, and I don't remember a lot, except that I remember going under the bridges, and they were still driving on them, and they were not in good shape. The canoers, I think, is probably what it was, but they were not in good shape. And I'm,
So this was before.
Yeah, this is when it was wild country. Yeah.
just the government.
What?
Government land.
I suppose it was government.
Maybe not not, it was probably right at the beginning.
It was wild. I know that. Unless that was another time that I remember the gate. But I know we camped, and in '69, because that's when Missy was born. So I know what the year it was.
Just pass it along there.
Okay. My name is Carolyn, and I'm from Viola, so I've lived in the Kickapoo Valley. But, you know, sometimes we take it for granted how beautiful this area is. And whenever, if we travel, whether it's, you know, in other states or other countries, and you come back, you're like, wow, this might be prettier than what we just were seeing. So it makes you appreciate it all over again.
I just wanted to say that I've had a long time privilege to work with Brad because we've worked on so many history projects here, and I was born and raised not very far from here, but I was in Green Bay for many years, and so when I came back here, I was looking for a homeboy that could really kind of teach me what was really going on here, and so I've spent a lot of time with Brad, so appreciate that.
Chuck, do you want to talk about Pokey Moonshine? I think that's an interesting story behind that name.
How many of you have heard of Pokey Moonshine?
I've been to it.
How many have been to Pokey Moonshine?
It's amazing.
As it turns out, there is another Pokey Moonshine, and you wonder how could you possibly reach into your head and bring out a name, Pokey Moonshine. And do all of you do you know what it is? What Pokey Moonshine is a rock formation on the reserve. It's right on the river. If you canoed the river from Bridge 14, yeah, from Bridge 14 down to Bridge, it's right at 15, yeah. So if you leave Bridge 14, which a lot of people do, and go all the way through the reserve, right after Bridge 15 is you hit a rock wall. I mean, there's a big wall that goes along, and leaning against that are some very large rock formations that look like they could be toppled over. The last one you get to is completely, you can actually, it's completely separated. You could actually, some years you can actually canoe around the backside of it. And that has been traditionally known as Pokey Moonshine. And where would you get the name Pokey Moonshine? Well, Google it and you find out that the people who came here brought with them the names of places that they remembered. Pokey Moonshine is, there's Pokey Moonshine Falls in upstate New York. And so how did that name get from New York here? Well, when you look at the first settlers, the ones who homesteaded land on Pokey Moonshine and that whole section on that side of the river, where were they from? And you look that up and you find out they were from Western New York. So they just brought this piece of history, this name from New York, and attached it to that rock. And all these years, it's shown up, Pokey Moonshine Rock has shown up in books. Alluring Wisconsin, I know an old book that was around, but many of the books that had the Kickapoo Valley in it included Pokey Moonshine by name as a place to see. Of course, then they shut off Highway 131, or at least moved Highway 131 out of the river corridor, so it's so hard to get to it now unless you walk the whole trail, that whole trail that goes up the old 131. So, but it's worth it, and you can't see it from the road anymore because the brush and the trees have grown up so bad. You almost have to know where it is. So if the bridges have numbers, if you get to Bridge 15, it is just downstream. You can stand on Bridge 15 and look at a rock wall. To the right of that is where Pokey Moonshine is. And you can, yeah, downriver, yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Chuck and I had a class up at Pokey Moonshine. Well, we weren't at Poking Moonshine, we were in the area. And all of a sudden we had some of our younger class members trying to jump across, yes, trying to jump across from the land over to Poking Moonshine and doing it. And it's like you're 3 or 4 stories up, you know, if you don't make it, woo, right straight down. I didn't try it, Chuck didn't try it, but they did it, so. But it's, yeah, fascinating.
All right, I'm Lonnie Weber. We moved to this area in 2002, and we both grew up in Wisconsin, but didn't really know about the Driftless area. My family would drive through this area going on vacations, and I think it was in '98, Dick's brother drove from Marshfield to meet us in the Quad Cities, and he came through this area. We were going backpacking in Colorado, and he says, I just drove through the neatest part of the state. And we were living in Ohio at the time and not liking it in southern Ohio at all, and knowing we weren't going to stay there after we quit working. So anyway, we started looking in the Driftless area for a place to retire to, and we did, 23 years ago.
Well, let's see. I'm just trying to think. So what Carolyn said kind of triggered something for me. So I grew up in Valley, and we were neighbors with Gary and Linda Withrow, Drifty, as many people probably know Drifty. And he was a long-haul truck driver, and he would always tell us kids, you know, I've been all over the country, but the most beautiful place is right here. And that really stuck with me when I was a kid. So, and it's true. So, Drifty's right. And they did, yeah. Yeah. And then being a neighbor to Drifty, he kind of he'd like to get into some shenanigans, and they would, like, you know, go harvest their own Christmas trees from the government land or, you know, whatnot. So, yeah, just all kinds of. Yeah.
Interesting, once you spend a couple hours at Rockton, you're more willing to do it. Yeah. Sarno, nothing? Anyone else have anything? This has been fun.